Hello everyone, it's Lit Lessons with GCSE Memes. Once again, today looking at Christmas Carol with you, but looking at a slightly more minor character in the character of Fred. So we'll look at three key ways that Fred is presented in three key staves. Thinking about why he's presented that way, and thinking about why we have this minor character in the text at all. Okay, and it's really good to look at minor characters in your revision. Because who knows, an examination might ask you to look at the presentation of Fred in an extract, so you want to make sure you revise widely. But also, if you are doing a theme question, it is really good to try and talk about minor characters rather than just talk fully about major characters like Scrooge in a response, because it shows your knowledge of the text far more widely, and it will help you hit those higher marks as well. So first of all, before we do any of that, we are going to look at who Fred is and think about what kind of things that we must know about him from a basic standpoint. So Fred is Scrooge's nephew. Okay, he is the only, as far as we know, living family member of Scrooge, and he is someone who has got very little money in comparison to his uncle, and that's obviously referenced quite early on in the text, that Scrooge doesn't understand why his nephew is so happy because he is poor enough, for example. As well as this, what we need to remember is he's the son of Fan. Now we're going to come back to this reference and why this is important later on in the video. But we have to remember that Scrooge's sister, Fan, had Fred and died, we think, in childbirth as a result of Fred's existence. So there is obviously some tension between Scrooge and Fred, because I think Scrooge in some ways perhaps puts responsibility on Fred for the death of his sister. As well as this, he is a hoster of dinner parties, as we see in Stave 3. We'll be looking at that section and how his dinner parties are presented later on. And Dickens has purposely made him a loyal fiancé. Again, I think to make him the opposite of Scrooge, who obviously had a failed engagement himself. Now, we're not going to use the word opposite too much, hopefully, when referencing Scrooge and Fred, because even though Fred and Scrooge are opposites, right, it's quite a common and easy word to use. Instead, what we're going to use as a word today is this word here, antithesis, which is just a very posh word for opposite. And Fred is in many ways an antithesis for Scrooge. Dickens has purposely made him that way to show you what Scrooge is like in the text. Now we're going to look at three key words to describe him in these sections that we're going to look at now. And these are the key words here. Fred is these things. He's cheerful and optimistic, he's generous and kind-hearted, and he is Scrooge's antithesis or opposite. So let's start by looking at that bottom one there, how he is an antithesis to Scrooge. And Stave 1 is the best example of where we see this. And what we see in this speech that he does to Scrooge is this idea that he has little interest in profiting from things while still enjoying them. He says here, there are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say. This idea that he's not really bothered about profiting from things, but still being able to enjoy them, shows you he's very different from his uncle. He is not always interested economically in gaining from things. And this immediately shows that he has less interest in money, that he's more selfless as well. As well as this, unlike his uncle, he is someone who loves Christmas, and he uses these words here: a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. And these words not only describe his love of Christmas and what he loves about Christmas, but also come to describe him as well. He too is a kind, forgiving, charitable and pleasant person. So that's the next thing that we need to see in Fred, that he is very different from Scrooge in his outlook of what Christmas is like. As well as this, he uses a metaphor to describe people as fellow passengers to the grave when it comes to Christmas. Everyone recognises that they're all going to die soon and to treat each other well at Christmas. And he is in many ways an advocate of equality. He doesn't like The idea that people treating each other poorly at other times of the year just because of their differences in class. So he talks about why he loves Christmas and how it shows people to be more equal and celebrating equality. And that makes it very different from his uncle, who actually wants the poor to die to decrease the surplus population. As well as this, he finishes this speech that he does to his uncle when visiting him with "God bless it." And whenever you see a reference to a character saying God bless or God, we immediately have to think of that character as being morally good, because we think about religious people, and in Christian terms the Bible, it is a text that is intended to teach us to be good to one another and to respect one another. And we certainly see that Fred in many ways does follow the Christian belief of treating each other well and with respect, certainly here. So that's the first way he's presented. The second way he's presented is cheerful and optimistic, and this is most evident in his dinner parties, where we see him talking about his uncle with his dinner guests, but also through these verbs here when people are enjoying his dinner party. And the word laugh, that verb, is used regularly to describe him and to describe his guests, which show you that Fred is the embodiment of positivity. People can't help but be happy around this figure. So immediately, once again, he is a positive character indeed. What makes him even more positive in this section is that he tries every year to help Scrooge change his outlook on Christmas. He's a loyal member of Scrooge's family, in spite of the fact that he's insulted and mistreated by his uncle, as we see in Stave 1 in the section we've just looked at as well. On top of this, he doesn't only want to help Scrooge change, he actually pities him and he shows compassion for this person who shows him none back. But also consider the fact that potentially he might feel guilty for his mother's death and for killing Scrooge's sister. And therefore he may feel sorry for him because he has created some of the misery on Scrooge, obviously not meaning to, in that death in childbirth. As well as this, he has and shows some blind hope, and he thinks that he has changed the way Scrooge is with that rousing speech we've just seen. And the fact that he thinks this immediately shows you that this character is someone who has hope for change in the character of Scrooge, which ultimately gets rewarded when we see a different Scrooge at the end of this novella. So that's key emotion and key feeling and key presentation of Fred, number 2. Number 3 then is his generosity and kind-heartedness, and we see this actually in the visions of the future, and it's Bob Cratchit's description of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, of Fred, which shows this. Now, Bob and Fred have only met once in the novella, yet Mr. Scrooge's nephew, Fred, shows him some extraordinary kindness which Bob cannot believe. But it immediately shows once again that even though he's only met someone once, he is still able to be kind to them, which immediately makes Fred once again this kind of immensely positive figure in comparison to his uncle. This is only made more evident through that superlative there in pleasantest spoken. He is the pinnacle of goodness in the society. He's the number 1 of goodness in the society because of that ST word. As well as this, okay, he actually offers his help to Bob, who in this future vision has lost Tiny Tim, and this provides a direct contrast to his selfish uncle at the start. He's once again his antithesis there. So that's the 3 key ways that I think of when I think of Fred. Now it's up to you. There's some questions here for you to have a go at, and I will of course as always put the full text in the description to help you with that. One of those is a themed question, one of those is an extract question. They are a bit more independent than some of my other videos, so give those a go. And as always, we finish with a meme, so do feel free to pause the video here if you want to keep those on your screen. Our meme, however, for today is one that involves some celebrities there for you. Have a bit of a gander at that. And if there's anything else that I can help you with, please leave some comments in the comments section of this. Okay, poor Ryan Reynolds there, trying to celebrate Christmas